Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm here with Nathan Barry. Hi Nathan.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show. Just a little introduction. Nathan is the author of 3 books, a software designer, and the founder and CEO of ConvertKit, which helps creators earn a living through email marketing. Now, very exciting, Nathan. You started out in programming, but then you wrote several books, including Authority, which is all about self-publishing. So what did you learn from writing books that led you into starting your larger online business, ConvertKit?
Yeah, I think probably the first thing that I learned is that you could actually make money from writing books and self-publishing. I had this idea, because I'm writing technical books, right? So my background is as a software designer, and so I was writing books on how to design software. And I was writing those books not because I was like, oh, I'm going to put this out there and the sales are going to make me plenty of money. I was putting it out there because I was like, I want more consulting gigs. I want more people to say, oh, you know what? I want to hire Nathan to design my iPhone app, because he wrote the book on how to design iPhone applications. So I was looking at it from that angle. So the first thing that surprised me the most is like, oh, you can actually make meaningful amounts of money from this. And then the second thing that surprised me is that after I wrote those 2 books, and I was just very, public and transparent with the whole process and the revenue that it made and all of that, as I started getting asked way more about, okay, how do you build an audience? How do you self-publish? How do you earn a living from your books? Then I was getting asked about how to design software. People were like, yeah, cool. That software thing is great. What's going on here? Like, how do you do this? I want to do that. And so then that really, that's what I took into ConvertKit, is that, oh, there's a whole bunch of people who want to know how to do this, and, and are already doing it, right? Because I think for most people outside of the worlds that you and I run in, they're just like, you earn your living how? You're a blogger. Oh, you're an author. Okay. That's not, they're like, but you can't make money at that, right? But then once you get in our circles, you're just like, no, you absolutely can make money at it. And you and I can list off dozens or hundreds of names of people who do it quite well. And so it's not even this crazy exception anymore. And so I think that really drew me to ConvertKit of like, okay, I can make tools just for these people exactly, and not for the general business world.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I mean, I'm particularly interested in why you chose self-publishing rather than, following the model which most people do. Was it that you've always had the entrepreneurial control freakery that so many of us have? Or did you, what did you see in self-publishing that made you want to choose that route originally?
Yeah, so I think something that I've had for a long time in my career is just expecting that no one will, choose me maybe. And so I think a lot of people do this where they pre-reject themselves. They're like, I could ask for this. I could try to get a publishing deal. I could, all of these things. But they would never choose my book. So let's not even ask, And I've had to work a lot to overcome that of well, hold on. I'm not going to reject myself before I give someone else the opportunity to do it first, And so just getting more comfortable asking for things. So self-publishing, you get to just no one tells you, you're good enough to self-publish. I'll give you the self-publishing stamp of approval. You're allowed to self-publish. No one says that. And so it's just you just decide to do it, and then you get to do it. So that was part of it. Another part is that I wanted it to go quickly. I didn't want to spend 2 years on this. I wanted to spend 9 months. Kind of when I set my mind to something, I just want to do it. And then the last part is the person who was the closest model for me in this world is Chris Guillebeau. I came across his stuff pretty early on, went to his World Domination Summit conference. I think I don't know how many, there's been 7 of them, and I've been to the most recent 6. I missed the very first one. But he just had this great example of, publishing books and guides and courses, or self-publishing them to his own audience. And so I was like, that sounds great. I'll just, whatever Chris says, I'll do that. And that's worked out pretty well in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's interesting. But then I've been reading your yearly roundups, which I do as well. And I love reading these because you can really see changes over time, obviously. And you've had children, so there's physical changes, new people in your life. But what was interesting to me was in 2014, you kind of posted the up and down graph of your income from info products at around the time you decided to pivot. So it's interesting because you said you were surprised that you could make money with info products, but obviously there came a point where you were like, there's a trade-off. So was it like the hamster wheel of creation, or what made you switch from writing, publishing into software?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. My background's in software design, and so I wanted to design software, not just teach people how to design software. And so I found this little bit of time where I was loving building an audience and all this other stuff, but was starting to get a little frustrated I was like, oh, I'm teaching stuff that I haven't spent as much time doing. I haven't opened Photoshop or Sketch or written code about this stuff, recently. And so I wanted to get back to doing that. I also wanted a new challenge. I felt like, there's certainly people who had done self-publishing and information products far better or far more successfully than I had. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I know how to make $250,000 a year doing this without any new challenge. I had learned the skills to do it on that level. And I looked at the people who were taking the revenue a lot further. They ran these businesses doing $1 million a year or something crazy like that. And I looked at their businesses, and it wasn't something that I wanted to recreate. I didn't want to have 7 employees to help me run this course business with giant launches, and then, this like one big open and close launch every year. And then the rest of the year I have all these payroll costs to worry about. And I just didn't want to run that kind of business. So I was looking for a new challenge to get back into software and to solve a problem that I had where I was using MailChimp and I was frustrated by it. And I was like, okay, I can do better. There's a little bit of, arrogance in there that I think most entrepreneurs have in some way, where you're like, really? No, I can do better than this. Whether it's I can write a better book, or I can build a better company, or solve this problem better. So that got me into it. And then for me, it's a problem of focus. For the first almost 2 years of ConvertKit, I tried to do both at the same time. And it took me a long time to learn that I'm just not good at that. There are some people who can multitask lots of things. They're like, oh, I'm writing this book. I am doing all these other things. I'm guest posting on these blogs. I'm just doing everything. And I'm like coaching my kids' soccer team at the same time. Like, come on, why can't you be as awesome as I am? And I'm just not good at that. I was trying to start a software company, and I wasn't even trying to write new books, but I was trying to continue this, the current books, relaunch them, all that kind of thing. And I just couldn't balance it well. And so I made the decision to quit the books and let them coast down to whatever they were going to drop off to, and to focus entirely on ConvertKit. And it ended up being a really good decision, but there was definitely times where, financially, in the short term after making that decision, it was not great. But in the long term, it worked out really well. I think in my latest review post, I have those graphs of like, here's the information product revenue, and it goes from like 15,000 to 100,000 the next year to 250,000, and then it like goes down the other side quite a bit. And you're like, oh, that graph looks terrible. Like no one would ever want that for their business. And then when you could the next graph, I overlay it with ConvertKit's revenue, and the numbers on the info product side are so small that they barely even register on the graph compared to and so it's like, okay, that was the trade-off. And so if there's something that you really want to go after, I would just say, make sure to focus, get clear on what that is, and then clear up enough space so that you can actually focus on it.
I think what's interesting is you talk about modeling there. You've broken away from what Chris Guillebeau was doing, in the, that model is there. But one of the things you have done, which does model him and is, I think, fantastic. I've been watching your videos. You have a craft and commerce conference, which I wanted to ask you about, because you have made creativity part of ConvertKit. But many, and you've got craft and commerce, which is what I believe in, absolutely. But many creatives struggle with mingling creating and doing, like you're still doing, but also with money. So what are your tips for managing the balance between craft and making a good living?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides of it, and you can go wrong on either extreme. Like on one end you have, and I think we've all come across them, the internet marketers in the maybe the sleazy sense of the term. And I think of these people as they're just, they're looking for one weird trick to make money on the internet. They're like, as easy as possible. How can I make money? Like, oh, Facebook ads are working super well for you. Okay, I'll do that. There's no thought to the art that they're creating, the craft. It's just 100% about as much money as quickly as possible. And then you get the people on the other end who, they're the artist who, they might describe, they're like, oh, I would never sell out. Or I would never, it's 100% about the craft. I'm going to toil away in my studio for absolutely as long as it takes. And it's so unfortunate that you can't earn a living as an artist. And you get these two different worlds, and I just want to bring them together. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, okay, what if you cared really deeply about who your art is for and create, like putting in the work? You're not looking for the shortcuts. You're not looking for how can I get to this as quickly as possible. You're like, how can I spend the next 5 years, 10 years becoming really good at this one skill? And then how can I get it out to as many people as possible? So it really, whether it's teaching them something else or exposing them to art or great stories or whatever, like get it in front of as many people as possible. And then understand that artists should be really, really well paid. I really like some examples from Jeff Goins and his book, Real Artists Don't Starve, which, by the way, is one of my favorite book titles of all time.
And Jeff's been on the show to talk about that book, so yeah.
Yeah. But, he just talks about how artists, in the Renaissance and earlier, like, were wealthy individuals, right? Like, you're contributing something meaningful. You're incredibly good at what you do, and you should earn a living from it. And so the conference is all about bringing these two ideas together. And so no one's like, hey, here's this one weird trick that I used to double my income last year. They're like, you have someone like James Clear giving a talk about, these are the habits that I crafted over time that enabled me to write on the schedule, that enabled me to build this audience, that enabled me to make this income. And so the more I can get people to bring those ideas together, like, that just makes me so happy.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Now, you mentioned focus, but you also mentioned that the early years, I guess, of ConvertKit that were a bit of a dip. So what are some of your mindset attitudes for getting through that dip? Because many of the authors listening are kind of in that dip. They want the craft, but they also want the money. But we both know there's a period where there isn't both. It is a slow burn. So how did you get through those early years of no money?
Yeah. I think the first thing to realize is that anything worth doing is going to take far longer than you think. Far longer than, even you're like conservatively estimating how long it's going to take. We have this idea at ConvertKit that, we put on our t-shirts and posters and laptops and everything else, and it's just create every day. And, just putting this consistent work in. So for me in writing, that's writing 1,000 words a day, and I'm just that's something I learned from Chris Guillebeau and adopted. And, my longest streak was like 650 days in a row of writing 1,000 words a day. Turns out if you do that, like, you can push through a lot of stuff. There's actually this post on Reddit that I came across just a couple weeks ago that I really enjoyed. And it was someone they were talking about overcoming depression and, and complacency, where you're just like, I feel like I didn't accomplish anything. But they had this concept that they talked about of a non-zero day. Mm-hmm. And I really liked that, because it was like, you're not trying to accomplish a lot. You're not trying to make a lot of progress on your book, but you just anything more than zero. And then you line up a bunch of non-zero days in a row. It could be that you wrote 10 words. I don't know. It could be that you spent 20 minutes writing down title ideas or whatever else. But like if you're really struggling to get started, then you want to line up a bunch of those non-zero days, and then later you might raise your standards. You're like, okay, I'm gonna try to write 100 words a day. But it's that like creating really consistently. And then my friend Sean McCabe, his site is SeanWest.com. He has that create every day idea, taking it further, and he has this poster that he does, or I think hand illustration and stuff. But he just talks about show up every day for 2 years. And because there's a lot of things where it's like, I want to do that. It's like, okay, do you want that enough that you're willing to work on it every single day for 2 years? And like often the answer is no. And then you're like, okay, well maybe it's not worth starting. People are like, I think I can accomplish this, and so I'm going to do it. And they're like, and I often have this time horizon, like, oh, I bet I can get that done in 2 months, and it's like, okay. And it's worth doing if you can do it in 2 months. But is it still worth doing if it was going to take 2 years? And so when I hear people, they're like, I tried to write a book, but it didn't work out for me. Or I tried to start a blog, but I didn't get any traffic. And I'm like, that's great. How long did you work on it? And they're like, oh, I worked on it every weekend for like 3 months. And I'm like, okay, let's try something a little different. Every day for 2 years. And then you're allowed to come to me and say, like, look, writing a book is not for me. Blogging is not for me. This isn't working out. I genuinely tried. But you have to set those expectations correctly. And then the software world, for me, it was just, I'm going to make sure that ConvertKit is better in some way. Maybe I fixed a little bit of copy so it's more clear. Maybe we redesigned something, built a new feature, but it's better every day at the end of the day than it was at the beginning of the day. And that's my milestone. And it's just create every day.
I think I also really love, because my husband's been a coder, and I know some people believe that only like writing fiction is creative, but when you say create every day, you also mean coding as part of creativity, don't you? So, and I know some people listening won't really understand that, but can you just explain from a techie perspective, like why is coding so creative?
Yeah, because I think of a lot of creativity as solving problems, or really just making anything. But coding particularly is about solving problems and how you're going to creatively solve this problem so that it works efficiently, it's easy to understand, it reads clearly. I think a lot of writers, if someone is Jason Fried talks about how they try to hire people who are clear writers and good writers, because if you're a good writer, you're a clear thinker, because that's a skill, to be able to translate these ideas and put them down succinctly. And so they even want their programmers to be good writers, because even though it's a different skill, it points to this clear thinking. And so being able to clearly express these ideas, whether you're doing it in words or in code, it's the same concept. But yeah, I apply the idea of being a creator to pretty much everything. So like this weekend, I got a new table saw out in my shop in the garage, and I was out there building stuff. And my best days are the ones when I make something. So whether it's writing a blog post or like this weekend, I made a new cutting board, out of wood, and like just whatever it is, I just like to make stuff, and I apply it in pretty much every industry.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And then one of the things, I mean, we all know that when you start a business, when you build a business, you are going to be working quite a lot of hours. But you have a young family. Like you said, you've got these other things. You play soccer or football, as we call it over here. So yes. How do you manage how have you managed, I guess, in the difficult times, the balance between having your young family, your relationships, your own creativity with building this basically multi-million-dollar business?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is I work from home, and a minute ago you probably heard a 3-year-old not having the happiest Monday afternoon, and so there's some of that where I'd at times be teaching a webinar or something and be like, and that's August, he's not super happy, so working from home has its pros and cons for that, right? I can be around, be a part of family life. a lot more than I would be able to otherwise. Like I just gain a lot of time just by killing off a commute in the first place. But then the other thing is I can put in time when other people aren't willing to work, or, you normally have gone home for the day. And so the kids go to bed by 8 or 8:15 at night, and that leaves me, a good hour or 2 hours. The other thing is I think you just have to be more disciplined overall. I will tend to write down what I'm going to do next. So like prep my work, like as I'm wrapping up for the day, I will write down clearly what I'm going to do the next time I come back to the computer. So when I come back to this computer, I'll look and I'm not like, oh, what should I do? Let me catch up on everything. It's just like, no, it's clearly stated what I should be doing next. So I can just start that. And that's the kind of thing that I'll often fit in on a Saturday morning or, some of those other times. So yeah, I definitely put in a lot of hours, but, I don't know, you get to balance going and doing things like, going to the park or whatever else at like 2 p.m. with the kids when everyone else is at school and work. And I'm allergic to crowds just in general, not actually, but and so whenever other people are like, everyone's going to the lake on a Saturday, like you better believe I'm there on a Friday morning with the kids, or that kind of thing.
It's all right. You're on a podcast with a load of introverts, so
yes,
we get that. So then I wanted to kind of switch gears and ask you about ambition, because I think it's another word like money that many creatives struggle with. Like on the one hand, yeah, I want to win a literary prize and be like on the stage with Stephen King. And then on the other hand, it's like, oh no, but I mustn't want that. So with you, I mean, you clearly, I think to take things up a level, you have to be ambitious on some level to drive through those sort of thresholds that you have. So how have you balanced the ambition, I guess, the positive and negative sides of ambition in yourself?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I think the things to balance would be ambition, contentment, gratitude, and everything along those lines, because it's so easy to be constantly pushing for more, whether it's from book sales or software revenue, it's never enough. We're always trying to hit a higher level. And you're like, really? It's already exceeded my wildest dreams. Why is this not enough? And so I think it's challenging once you've hit some level of success to keep creating and keep pushing yourself from a position of contentment. Like if ConvertKit did not grow at all from now on, would I be content? And I think what I've come to is what I really want out of it is I want to keep learning and I want to keep growing and I want new challenges. And so it's not that I need more revenue or more Twitter followers or something like that, but I do need more challenges. And those other things, the audience sizes or the revenue, tends to be, I guess, just a way of keeping track of the new challenges that are coming up. And so I think when you approach it that way, you can be really grateful for the success that you have and feel content and still feel ambitious. Because you don't want that contentment to drive, a lack of motivation. And none of us want to become the person like, yeah, I had the best-selling book, and you know what? Now I'm going to go to the beach and hang out because those royalties pay me enough money. And, like we didn't sign up to be writers or creators or entrepreneurs to get to a certain income level and then check out. And so then, yeah, you've got to keep pushing those limits and you have to keep learning. But at the same time, you have to do it with gratitude. So ambition and gratitude together, I think, are really, really powerful. And then you don't get trapped in this frustrating cycle.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's the fun part too, right? It's learning something new is the fun part. Like I'm learning about screenplays at the moment, writing a screenplay adaptation. Like it may never make me any revenue, but I'm learning a lot. So it's fun, right, to keep learning.
Yeah, and I think if you add things Like that sounds like it's putting you fairly far outside of your comfort zone. Like you might have been able to, you know, write in the style that you're used to and publish that in the types of books that you're used to. And you're like, okay, I might push my comfort zone by 5% or 10%. You know, you're like edging it. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to go write a screenplay. And people are like, you don't know anything about that. You know, or like all of these things. And you're like, that's okay. I think the creatives that probably are going to struggle the most are the ones who are really, really afraid to fail. Like if you use your success already as like, who's someone? I think of Andy Weir. He wrote The Martian, right? Insanely successful book, like just wildly successful. And, you know, he might feel all of this pressure for his second book to be absolutely incredible, right? Because he's the guy who wrote The Martian. He can't come out with a mediocre book now. Whereas maybe if he had a mediocre book and then he had a little bit better of a book, like, so you can either approach it two ways. You can say the success that I've had is going to paralyze me from creating further because the bar is so high. Or you could approach it and be like, yeah, that worked out well. Let's go try something crazy and ambitious. And if it fails, that's totally fine because I'm the guy who wrote The Martian. So like, you know, I at least have that success. And so you can approach it two different ways, and one paralyzes you and keeps you from creating, and the other like gives you this freedom to try totally new things. You know, another example would be like George W. Bush, the former president of the U.S., taking up painting. You know, is his painting amazing? No, but like he achieved becoming president, and now he's painting. Like he's not worried about failing at painting because he's like, no, like check that box. Now I can move on to something totally different. And he's not thinking people are like, you know, whatever you think of his presidency. No one's like, oh, because you achieved that high level, now you should also be good at this totally other thing. He has no fear of failure, and so he's pursuing something that he wants to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's so interesting. That's why I love J.K. Rowling, because I mean, she could just be resting in her castle, whatever, on her pillow, but no, she keeps writing, she keeps producing because she's a creator, and she'll never be done. We're never done until we die, right? That's also the fun part. But then let's circle around to ConvertKit, because you've mentioned a number of times solving problems and, you know, serving customers as well. So there are a lot of email providers out there. So what problem did you see in the market that led you to build ConvertKit?
Yeah, so there were a couple problems. And I was using MailChimp at the time. And first, I was completely shocked that email marketing works so well, because it's been around forever. And, you know, I launched my books. This was in 2012. I launched my first book and launched to an email list of 800 people, and nearly all the sales came from that email list. And I went to a friend of mine who'd been doing online marketing for a long time. And I was like, I don't know if you know this, but it wasn't Twitter or Facebook or Instagram that drove the sales. It was email. Like it drove all these sales. And, you know, email drove more than all of the social platforms combined. And he's like, we've known that since like 2001. And so I was really late to the party there. But once I learned that, I just kind of became obsessed with it. And then I started learning all these best practices, and I wanted to implement everything that I could to, like, you know, if this is working and I have no clue what I'm doing, how well could it work if I actually applied best practices? And that was things like tagging your customers, or, you know, they're really common now, but back then kind of a new thing was content upgrades, or, you know, putting something basically – if you at the end of your blog post having a call to action or an email opt-in that was specific to that post, get a higher conversion rate. And if you tried to do that in MailChimp, you'd end up with all these different lists, where to do that for every single one, you had to create a new list. And I was like, oh, okay, that's no problem. And then I realized that MailChimp was charging me. If the same person was on each list, they'd charge me twice. And I'm like, wait a second. Now I understand why your support team recommended that I do this. You know, and then someone would buy, and I'd put them on a third list. And then I was like, okay, no, we need tags for this. We need, you know, there's a bunch of these problems that we can solve. And it was really just a matter of me realizing, oh, MailChimp and all these other providers are built for small businesses. And as much as I'm a small business, like I think the U.S. Department of Commerce defines small business as 0 to Yeah, 0 to 500 employees.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a pretty big range. Like ConvertKit's a pretty good sized business, I feel like, and we have 30 employees. And so like we're still at the absolute bottom end of that small business range. So it's like, well, if MailChimp and others are serving small businesses, that's such a broad range. And that explains why they don't have all these things that are best practices for our industry, because our industry is less than 1% of who they're trying to serve. And so that's why I was like, okay, I can solve my own problems, build the tool that I want, and then, rally people together who have the same problems. And then I get to like not feel bad about saying no to people. Like someone will come along who, they have this enterprise software business and they're like, oh, we could use ConvertKit if you just build this functionality. And so thanks, but it's not for you, go use something else, because, ConvertKit is email marketing for creators. And so as creators, we have a different set of problems, and I just think we can solve them better.
And I guess the sort of big question, because I know a lot of authors have resistance towards email marketing because, it doesn't feel creative to do emails. That's just it. I think that's what it comes down to. I know I'm resistant to doing emails because I'm like, oh, well, I'd rather be writing a story or something like that. So, what can you tell people to sort of convince them that email marketing can fit under that creative banner?
Right. So it's just a different media type, it's written words. The first problem that I think a lot of creatives make when they get into email marketing is that they like really focus on design, and they think, oh, I'm going to design a great looking email. But that's like using the weirdest canvas. I don't know, like email is a terrible canvas to design on. It'd be like painting on cardboard or something. It's just like, it's not any good for it. Email is for writing, and it's for telling stories, and it's for connecting with people, because you get this really personal connection with, whether you have 20 people on your email list or 20,000, they're signing up so that you can get into their inbox every single day or every week or every month. And so if you treat it that way, as like this little group of people who want to hear about whatever you're working on and get the inside scoop, they want to hear about your ideas that aren't fully fleshed out. Like you're supposed to be working on your novel, and you had this idea for this other short story, and you're like, oh, but I can't, they would just distract from the novel. No, you can write that short story that's 3 pages long and send it out to your email list, and they'll love it, because they're not just a fan of your writing. They want to be a fan of you, and they want to know the story behind it. And so for me, it ends up being this community that I can talk to and say, this is what's going on. This is how the book is coming. This is what I'm up to. And it ends up being this creative outlet, because I think I lower the standards. And I don't hold it to this super high standard where I have to be perfect or anything like that. It reminds me of a quote. I can't remember the lady's name, Sandra something. But she talks about how if you hit writer's block, lower your standards and keep writing. And I think about that because I think a lot of people, hit some kind of writer's block when it comes to email. Like, what should I send? I got to get this perfect. I have to have the perfect sales copy on my page to sell this book or whatever else. And it's like, no, you don't. Be genuine, create, and say, I've had launch emails where I'm promoting a book that I came out with that said, hey, I think you'll like this. Here's why. And it's like a couple sentences, and then here's where to go buy it. There's no perfectly crafted sentences that I'm absurdly proud of, or I think the wordplay is just perfect. It's just like, here's why I made this. I think you'll like it. If you do, let me know. If not, let me know what I can do better on it. And if you take that approach, then it just feels like you're using email as a way to share whatever you created with your friends, rather than perfectly crafting every interaction or worrying that you're doing it wrong,
That's interesting. And as you're saying that, I'm wondering if authors particularly have an issue with this because we use language and because we want our language to be perfect and polished, and we're used to working with editors. I mean, maybe I'm just thinking now for myself, maybe that's part of my resistance. But like you're saying, it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe it's more like talking rather than finished prose.
Yeah, for sure. And along those lines, I think writing emails, you could even talk them out and record them. Seth Godin talks about how no one ever complains about talker's block and how that's not a thing, because, you know, I think the biggest thing about it is if I say something poorly and I can see that slight look of confusion on your face, so you don't understand it, I can just try to say it again better. You know, it's much more of a stream of conscious. I can just get these ideas out there and improve upon them as they go. And whereas writer's block, everyone's trying to get it perfect and they write it out and, you know, then they hit the backspace key a bunch of times. And so I think with email, you get to try out these ideas. You're like, have this idea and you write it out and send it out to the list and say, what do you think? And then, like for me, you know, at some point in the future when I write another book, a lot of the content from it will be ideas that I've tried out with my email list beforehand, you know, of trying to like flesh this out of what do I think on this? I have an idea, but it's not fully formed. So let me write it. Now it's a little more concrete. Let me send it to the list. Let me have some discussions over email. People have some other stories that they share. And then, you know, 6 months later, when it comes time to write the book, or who knows when I'll actually write my next book, but, you know, then this idea will be a lot more fully formed. So I think of it as a playground, and then it's just fun. No one goes to like a playground at a park and is like, am I playing correctly? Let me make sure that I'm playing the right way, because otherwise that would be terrible. You know, they're just like, I don't know, just have fun. And that's the way I see email.
Yeah, no, I love that. Now, we are almost out of time, but and we're going to do a webinar, so I'll link to that in the introduction and everything. But just give me two things. So if people are new authors and they're going to start on ConvertKit, what is a particularly good thing for them? And then if they have a list already, but they want to take things to the next level, what is one thing that's good for them?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're just getting started, then the first thing that you want to do is start gathering email subscribers. So a lot of people get hung up on what exactly I would send to them, all this stuff. Okay, we can cross that bridge when we come to it. But like first start growing the list. And so put something out there and say, either join this list and the first thing you'll get is a sample chapter of the upcoming book, or, you know, a lot of famous authors, I think of this author, Adam Grant, who he wrote, I'm spacing on all the books that he wrote, but he's written a lot of great books in like the research and nonfiction space. And his newsletter is just, you know, once a month, his ideas that he sends out. And he's just saying, hey, if you like my books, you'll also like this. And there's not like a strong sales pitch for the newsletter, but it's sign up, get some more details, etc. So start with that, you know, just a form or a page on your site, you know, yoursite.com/newsletter. And it's just sign up to get whatever I'm working on. I like what Derek Sivers does. He's written a bunch of books. No, he hasn't written very many books, but a book, Anything You Want, which is one of my favorites. He has, I think, sivers.org/now. And he just takes the approach of like, this is what I'm working on. You know, and that's an easy thing to tell someone. And if I'm a fan of your work somewhere else, then yeah, I want to know what you're working on now. And so you can take that approach. So you could say, sign up for my email list to hear what I'm working on most recently. And once a month, you keep people updated. So that would be the easiest thing if you're just dipping your toes in the water. If you have a list already, then, you know, and you have subscribers coming in, then it's time to add a little bit of automation to it. And don't go crazy with these automated launches and all this stuff. There's a time for that down the road if you want to. But for now, just think, okay, if someone's brand new to my work and they sign up to my email list, what is it that I want them to know? What ideas are fundamental to what I believe that you should know before you read the blog post that I wrote yesterday? You know, and so there's that post that I wrote 2.5 years ago that you should probably read to understand how I see the world. Or maybe it's just some of my best work, like that short story, you know, that's buried in the archives that I'm so proud of. We'll put that in an email sequence so that after they sign up the next day, they get that in their inbox. And then 2 days later, they get another one of your favorite things. And then 2 days later, there's a link to Amazon to go buy that book, you know, so that you're automating some of those things and making sure that your new subscribers who are discovering you this week are getting the stuff that you put out years ago and are getting a pitch to go buy your product. And, because let's face it, that's part of your art. And we're all about combining, like the craft and the commerce. And so you have to actually ask for the sale. And if you do it in an automated way where your emails, then you only have to, I guess, get over that feeling of selling one time as you put it in the automated sequence, and then ConvertKit will do that for you. And you don't have to be like, oh man, I got to sell today again. You just wrote that once and it'll just do the work for you going forward.
I do love that. And I mean, I've recently moved over to ConvertKit, which is why you're on the show. And I moved over because I was so frustrated mainly with the tagging and segmentation elsewhere, which is definitely a more developed thing once you have a list, but it does make it very easy. And I think also it is a very friendly system. Like, you don't have to be techie. It just looks like, I don't know, I hate saying like MS Word because that's complicated, but if you can type on MS Word, you can use ConvertKit, right? It's not technical in that way.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah, we've worked really hard on making it easy to use, and I kind of have this unique advantage in having an entire background in software design and user experience and all of that, and then also being a creator and just saying, I'm going to build what I want and kind of nothing else. And then so combining those two things has been special. And so now it's fun to be able to serve so many creators. We've got a little over 17,000 creators using ConvertKit and paying for ConvertKit. So
yeah, well, I'm a very happy one of them. So tell us where people can find you and ConvertKit online.
Yeah, so ConvertKit is just at convertkit.com. One thing there that I would check out is go check out Tradecraft. It's linked to from the homepage. That's our monthly online magazine, and we cover a different topic every month. So whether it's how to create your first product, the one that comes out this week is all about how to teach webinars, if you've ever thought about doing that yourself. We cover a different issue every month. We have photographers and illustrators working on all of that. So it's a pretty high quality production. And of course, go sign up for ConvertKit. But then on my site, if you want to know what I'm up to, it's just nathanbarry.com. I write a little more often now than I did before. And maybe the year in review post would be a fun place to start. That's what I just published. So I do one every year, have for the last 7 years now. And so I think they're really fun because they're a little snapshot of not only an update in life, but a snapshot of your worldview and what you thought was possible at that time and your outlook on life at the time. So I think they're the most fun.
They are great. So thanks so much for your time, Nathan. That was brilliant.
Thanks for having me.